All right.
How
How are
so
you?
how I'm doing really good. I'm glad to
Oh,
see you. I have
yeah, I'm
met you
glad to meet you.
before, haven't
Uh-huh.
I?
Uh-huh.
Um,
Yeah, no, we met at when Jackie was like getting all the kids together and stuff with for the school and also I was at her kid's birthday party. So that's
that's right. And did you also go over to Brian's school at one point in time too? Yeah, I
yeah.
remember seeing you there too.
Hmm.
It's really good to see you again.
Yeah, it's good to see you too.
So, I'm excited about this, a little nervous because,
Yeah.
sometimes as sensitive people, we get really nervous. If you haven't noticed, I do a lot of my videotaping without my face present in the picture. Part of
Yeah.
that is a high level of shyness, even though I might not seem like it.
Oh,
So,
I mean that's fine. I mean, like if you feel more comfortable, not doing video, like I'm totally cool with that too. I mean,
it's
but
it's okay. It's just
okay.
it's okay. We can
Okay. Yeah, I
we
mean,
yeah.
like, oh, sorry.
We all have to get through our insecurities at some point in time too. And my brother actually used to call me Iron Gut. He said there was nothing that scared me, but I think actually I don't know if that was part of the neurodivergence. but but as I've gotten older, we go through those traumas in life, we tend to shield ourselves more and more and more. So yeah.
And I feel like that's just the neurodivergent experience. It's like something scares you so badly, but it's like society expects a certain thing from you, and you just got to do it anyway. And if you
Yeah.
have like these expectations that you need to fill, it's like nobody cares. So like so you kind of build up that hard skin. So,
Yes.
but yeah, if you don't mind me asking, like what type of neurodivergent?
So I've there, so it's a really tough one. I have never been formally diagnosed, but I have had several people ask me if potentially I might have a small form of autism. And women tend to highly mask because we want to be socially accepted. And
Yep.
I, I would have never thought that because that just wasn't something, even though I've taught children and I used to, and it's so funny because every time there was children with autism, they would always send them to me.
Hmm.
But I didn't understand that maybe there was an own reflection in that,
Hmm.
that maybe that's why I understood why, they did some of the things that they did. And so I don't like to label myself because labels can be really dangerous too. I just am who I am. And one of the things that I have another friend in Virginia and she was getting so much flack and she's one of these individuals that was born a medicine woman, you know, just really she has that in-depth knowledge of what that means and what that path means. And so because of that, that's a very circular perspective in a square world. So that's not wrong. That's just a different perspective. And oftentimes we feel like we have to fit that circular peg into that square hole and vice versa. You know what I'm saying? We have to try to fit to belong or to be something that somebody else expects for us. And that also causes people to shield themselves and to put themselves back because it might not be the operating norm in your area.
Right. And
Yeah.
and like it makes sense that they would send all these kids to you because like first of all, it takes one to know one, right?
Yeah.
And also, it's like if you know how painful it is to have to go through life where you're like forcing yourself to think and act in a way that's not natural for you. And
Yeah.
so you see these kids and you're like, no, like come here, I'll nurture you, like I get that, and
Yeah.
that's why I went into the profession that I did, and I'm sure that's why you went into the profession that you did,
Yes. And I never
Um,
would have thought of myself as being a person that would have depression because um I had somebody do something for me one time and she pulled up you know what runes are. It was really that's a little bit of a side thing. I'm kind of unique, but she kept pulling up the Wunjo rune, which is 3 times, which means joy, joy, and joy. So that's my inner nature. So when I would find myself in this depression, this is that I think has to do with the way that we are currently living. When we're living so skewed from what our true centers are, it takes us away from our inner self. It takes us away from our inner joy. And I want to be joyful because that's who I was as a child. And that's who I was as a young adult. Maybe a little shy in some cases, but also very, very loud. I think that's the other thing too, is like we go from moments of being really quiet to being really, really loud. And I used to think it was maybe just because I had the emotional intelligence and Gardner's intelligence. I thought maybe it was because I was musical rhythmical, but I'm starting to think, no, that was stemming and I didn't realize it, I didn't realize what some of that, was. So yeah.
I mean, and I think it's natural, for people who have neurodivergence to want to explain all the things that make them quote unquote weird, because it's like, well, I need to at least acknowledge, these things that I'm doing so that like people will accept me, or like people will know that I'm at least trying to fix it. And it's like, well, sometimes it doesn't need to be fixed. Like,
yeah. So
but yeah.
I think the most powerful words that anybody can ever say is just, I am. I am. And it doesn't need to have any other description around it. It doesn't need to have anything else. It's like when we can start accepting people for the whole spherical portion of what they are, versus to have to put them in a box. Okay, you're in this box, so I can get you. You're in this box, so I can get you. No, this is just who I am. And we come from a society, and I know it too because I really love science, and science is all about putting things into classifications and boxes. So, yep. And I actually enjoy science for that purpose because it helps me keep my world orderly. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Do you like science too?
I do a lot. Yeah. What's your favorite type of science?
I love earth science and I love astronomy equally. Yeah. I also love meteorology. And so those are, and my middle daughter, actually, she surprised the heck out of me, as kids do. She went into meteorology in the service. So she's doing weather. So now we have this language that we can say we can talk to each other about, which is kind of fun. Yeah.
Sweet. I kind of want to like touch on this last thing that you said about like the circular, like meeting people where they are, like understanding who the whole person is and then teaching that person. Like, do you think like that there's more of an emphasis on that in like your teaching background, like teaching Native children, versus like
absolutely.
Regular school systems?
You have to see the child for who they are. And I think part of it is because I'm Montessori trained too, which is
okay, there you go.
Which is all child focused. Excuse me if I itch because I have a puppy and she's shedding all of her puppy fur. So I'm probably wearing a layer of puppy fur.
Fine.
But one of the things I was always looking for different forms of education. I knew I wanted to be a teacher at age 6. Absolutely knew that's what I wanted to be. I always had my dolls around me and I was teaching them. I always had little tables with all of my stuff set up and I was teaching, and I just love teaching, and it doesn't matter how it turns out. And I knew it had to have a spiritual perspective to it. So that led me through a traditional degree, but then I went on to get my master's in Montessori. And that's where I was like, I cried. I don't know how many times I cried during those lessons because I realized this is the education I wanted for myself. And so I took some of that inner work towards my children that I worked with, specifically in Pine Ridge area. And that helped me to understand that following the child is where you needed to go. You always have to follow the child. And when we try to, and sometimes it's hard, I know, because we have a limited time frame, or we have 30 minutes, or we have an hour, and then we have all those pressures on us from, administration or whatever it is, that you have to get through this information in this time. But by doing that, you miss all the teachable moments, and you miss the child. You just miss the child, because what you're doing is sugarcoating them, and you're not reaching them. And there's a difference about laying education over the top of somebody versus going through the heart and reaching the core of that individual and connect. You have to reach the individual at a heart level first.
Yeah.
I put the medicine wheel up to remind me, because we always have to go into the center first, because that's where teaching happens. And it doesn't matter what type of individual you are, that's always a given, because I worked with people from all over the world. And once you reach their heart, then that's when education flows. So
Yeah, absolutely. No, I totally agree. And I was not a general education teacher for very long. Namely, I didn't even make it a full year as a general education teacher. And a lot of it was just because I was so heartbroken about being pressured to leave kids behind. It's like
yeah,
you have a certain amount of material that you have to get in a certain amount of time, like you said. You have specific targets that administration needs you to reach, and it's like you can't take the time if someone's struggling to actually, and nobody wants to do extra work, so it's it's not really even fair to you know tutor somebody outside of class if they don't want to be tutored. So it's you know what I mean. So it it just broke my heart, like having to leave people behind and having to treat them as test scores.
so that is because we are very data driven culture. And because
Yeah,
we are data driven, we are not people driven. Because if we
right.
were people driven, we would understand that that's a non-working model. That is a non-sustainable model for the human being.
Mhm.
Also, one of the things that's really important and I'm going to speak from the Lakota perspective, because that's the one I feel most connected to.
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
there is a broad range of Native American tribes, and we have to remember we can't lump them or put them all together. So in Lakota perspective, time is not seen as the same way that we see it. And we work more in cycles. We wait for the energy to gather. When the energy is gathered, then we can go forward with whatever it is that we have to do. And I learned that lesson very hard on the reservation, because I was also in the Legion, and they asked me to play the bugle for one of the elders' funerals that had been in the service. And they
Oh,
said, you need to be on the hill at 11 o'clock. And because they'll be
wow.
coming up with the body at that time. And so I got there, and it was November. So it was cold. It was really cold. And I
Is
had
that
my,
how you got? Oh, sorry.
so I had my trumpet there, and I'm standing there. And then it's
Yeah.
11:30, and then it's 12, and then it's 12:30. And it was almost 1 o'clock before everybody made it because time is not the way that we are structured in thus. And I realized, because they wait for the people to gather. People are coming from all over to come to a funeral. And they wait for them to gather in the building, for the services. They wait for them to gather at the memorial, because you think about the pressure around stress, the stress and pressure around time related, and especially when you're living in a circular world, or especially if you have any type of neurodivergence, how much stress that puts you. I can be anxious about something all day long when it's only a 30-minute thing, because of that neurodivergence. I don't want to be late. It's just, and that's so deeply ingrained. And so then I understood that the right time is when the energy is right
Okay.
versus what the time on the clock says.
Okay. No, no, totally. And is that how you got involved with the tribe in the first place? Was playing the bugle for the funeral?
No, that was a side a side effect
Okay.
because when they found out I was in the service, they didn't have a bugle player anymore in their local American Legion. A
Okay.
really nice gentleman at Wounded Knee District School was the one who invited me to come into the Legion. Um, because it is kind of an obscure talent. It's not something that everybody has, but I was in the military band. And so that was something that I did, and I enjoyed it very much. I enjoyed
Okay.
going
Well,
to speak to schools. I actually came into working on the reservation. I'm going to share a little story about when I graduated. It took me a long time
yeah.
to graduate with my first degree because I was raising children. And because, we tend to be, when our interests are something, that's what our interests are.
Yeah.
And so we follow our interests, which is very much a Montessori concept too.
Mhm.
And so I graduated with my bachelor's really late. I had a lot of breaks. I had traveled and gone to a couple of different schools. And I graduated from college and was actually headed out to Connecticut to be with my family out there. Had my car packed, had my baby in the car, had my cat in the car, and I hadn't even applied at the reservation. And my mom called me. She goes, Lynnea, I just got a call from Wounded Knee District School and they would like to offer you a job. I said, Mom, but I didn't apply. So here I am sitting halfway on the border between South Dakota and Minnesota. Well, long story short, I did go all the way to Connecticut and I did end up taking the job and coming back. So that was very Heyoka of me. That was very backwards
Wow.
medicine, as they say. And I found myself there and it felt very like divine timing. The people that I met, it was meant to be. Developed very strong relationships, especially with the Cedar Face family, both Paul and Fred and their kids and family, and just and my co-teacher who was from Rosebud Reservation. We co-taught sixth grade, which is it's a perfect experience because for a lot of kids there is not a stable mom and dad, and so we gave them kind of a stable male and female perspective. And so we developed kind of a TW.S within our classroom. And
What's that?
TW.S is like a form of like family. It's like your family. Which Choti is more like the camp, but the TW.S is more like a family because we really felt like a family. I taught sixth, seventh, and eighth grade. Again, another little bit of Heyoka medicine was at work because I was originally hired to be the science teacher. And I got
Oh,
there and they gave it to my co-teacher because he worked for IBM. But I had spent
okay.
all my focus on science and they put me in language arts. And that started a whole path for me teaching ESL and writing and things like that that I hadn't expected to do.
Wow. That's so
So
cool. So like what did like were there specific like books that the kids were more drawn to, like native books or like
So
uh
this is a true story, and I'm not going to hold anything back. When I arrived in my classroom, there wasn't even a pencil.
oh wow.
There was not even a single solitary book. There wasn't a piece of paper. Um, and all my stuff I had brought was for science. So I gave it to my teacher, my co-teacher, because and they literally had to give me a voucher for Kmart to go purchase stuff for my classroom. And so the only books that were there were the ones that I had to purchase. And it was really hard finding Native American authors. That is, so a lot of the authors for especially really good Lakota authors tend to be really old.
Yeah.
They're very much elder. And then there was children's books that were written, and oftentimes they were written by non-native authors. Okay.
Yep.
Even my book, as much as I love the fact that I've written this book, I'm a non-native author. And so there wasn't a lot out of there. What my children were most interested in was African American culture.
Oh,
And that blew my mind. They were
wow.
into rapping. They were into anything to do with and some of it wasn't very positive either. You know, it wasn't necessarily, they were taking on another persona, and that was kind of frustrating. So I worked more with where they were leading me than trying to lead them. And so for my 8th graders, we did Malcolm X because they were interested in African American culture. So we did the book by, you know, by Malcolm X, so they could
Wow.
understand, you know, what that struggle was like. And so I would try to lead it back to sovereignty, because one of the biggest issues, especially in all Native American tribes, is sovereignty, because they are sovereign nations within a nation. And we don't recognize that necessarily. I don't think anybody really understands that these are nations within a nation. And those treaties that they made are called the law of the land. Those are international treaties.
Right.
And so therefore they are treated differently because they are a nation within a nation. They have their own tribal laws. When you come onto the reservation, they have their own tribal police, their own tribal justice. And that is something to understand. So sovereignty is a big one, understanding that they have a right to direct where their nation is going. And
Yeah.
they were into Harry Potter. Harry Potter came that year too. So we went to the movie theater in a little town over in Nebraska to see it. And we also, because there was 2 6th grade classrooms that we taught together, and a 7th and 8th grade, we divided them up into houses, and we did the little Harry Potter event,
Oh,
and it was really fun.
that's
Um,
sweet.
but what we did is, for me, what I tried to do is I had them do stories from their elders, to go back and get the stories from their elders. And so, because Lakota is an oral language, it's not a written language. And now we have it written, but what's to say that that's how it would be written? And there's so many
Right.
different thoughts for how it should be written, that even
Yeah.
some of the people that are teaching it can't decide which is the better phonetic way to um to look at the language. And so getting their stories is the most important, because I did a game with them that you might find this interesting. Have you ever played the whisper game?
No. What is that?
Okay. So you get a group of people, and you put them in a circle, and then you come up with something that you're going to say, and then you pass it
Oh,
to the
telephone.
person. Telephone, yeah.
All right.
Yeah, telephone game, sorry. And
No, it's okay.
you see what it is when it ends up. Well, of all the other cultures that I've ever done that game with, the only culture that could get that direct line of what was said at the beginning to the end was my Native American students. And it's
Wow.
because of that high ability to understand that our history is passed on orally. If I don't remember it, it's not going to be passed on correctly.
Exactly.
And
Wow.
so when the family group started to be broken apart, especially with pushing everybody onto the agencies, and people were given these 25-acre land plots and told to farm, well, that completely broke up that inner circle. If
Right.
have you ever cut an apple in half the other way?
Uh, no.
Do it next time. It's a
Okay.
little experiment for you to do. It's a really fun way to look, because there's a lot of sacred geometry in our plants. And when we turn it that way, there's all these little dots, and they look like teepees around a central campfire. And when we went away from that circular living and had to put everybody into parcels, they were no longer living next to their auntie or their uncle. They were no
Right.
longer living next to their grandparent. And so the stories would have been told traditionally, especially during the winter. That was a big time for telling stories, was during the winter. And you would tell the stories over and over and over again. And there would be sign language to to make the story more vivid and to make it be remembered. So having them go back and talk to their elders was the best way that I knew how to have them be able to understand their stories. So we have to remember too that the oral, and I noticed this too, because then I taught reading and writing later on at Oglala Lakota College. I did foundational studies. So I was seeing students as they came into college. That was eye-opening. So some of my 7th generation students, that I had in 6th grade or 7th or 8th were now coming into college, and they weren't, I only had a few from my class that went into college, but I did see them. And it was very hard for them to get to that point. But majority of what was missing for these students was reading and writing skills. But yet they were absolutely the most amazing writers you will ever know. So we had to look at things in a different way of how we understand children. And so we did a writer's workshop, and we mixed art and writing together. And so they had their art displays and their writing displays, and their stories come through their art and their stories came through their writing. And we used the natural human learning process by Rita Smickelstein, which does a lot of peer-to-peer conversations, and then small group conversations, and then bigger conversations, so they could develop that. Because a lot of my Lakota students were incredibly shy. Very, very shy. So there's a lot of stereotypes about Native Americans, really fierce and stoic and all of those kind of things. And those really need to be wiped off the table. There is a difference between bands. Like I noticed a difference between the Pine Ridge band versus the Rosebud band. One's more of a feminine perspective, and one's definitely more of that masculine warrior perspective. So I noticed some differences even in the way bands are. So you can't kind of pigeonhole groups, or just like blanket. And that was one thing to be careful. And if you go back and you meet the person and you start first with their story, what is their story? That's the best book you'll ever read or write, because it's your personal story. And you can't get more truthful or more factual than your own personal narrative. And I feel that when it comes to books and reading, start first by letting them tell their story before you give them everybody else's story.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I mean, when you did that, like, did you notice like a difference in like their reading and writing skills after that? Like,
yes,
because
absolutely, absolutely.
How so?
Because then they started to see themselves as valid, as having a story to tell, having a history that they could be proud of. Because when you start to hear everybody else's stories, especially people that are within your kind of Wachoti or your camp group, it might be lots of different families coming together, but you have some shared experiences. You go, oh, okay, so they're having these things happen too. I'm not as strange or different as I once thought I was, and that's, but also that they had a lot of wisdom, and that they could go back and while people say to avoid doing timelines and stuff like that, but that is just, it's kind of like putting a blanket over pain. If you provide students with a safe space to express their pain, they don't have to carry it with them until it explodes sometime later. And the problem that we have is that, suicide, especially on the reservation, has gone down to ages 8 and 9, and that's unacceptable. Absolutely unacceptable that an 8 or 9-year-old would think that they would have to take their life. And so for me, when I go out to Pine Ridge, especially, it's a mixed feeling, because I'm very sensitive. So I feel the pain and the sorrow, but I also feel the beauty. And we have to understand that reservations were set up originally as penal camps,
Right.
and that's something I think that people forget. And there was all these almost like 7 layers of assimilation that happened, first from dividing the people from their migratory self, because
Right.
migration is a huge part of the Native American experience and the Native American culture, because they flow with the land, just like the water flows with the land, and they flow with the seasons, and they flow with the animal nations and the sky nations. And when you took that ability, especially to stop going to the 7 sacred sites where they did their ceremonies, and those were migratory, that was one of the first. I'm getting tingles. This must be important to tell that this was one of the first parts that started to break the spirit of especially the Lakota people.
Right.
And then you also had a lot of forced movement across the United States. So tribes were suddenly being bunched into each other. So when there was conflict, people need to understand that the people were not warfaring all the time. They didn't want to warfare. They wanted peace. They wanted to live in a peaceful manner, in a Lakota manner. But when you're shoving tribes across the United States because of westward expansion, and suddenly they're forced into proximity and having to share resources and all that kind of, it can cause conflict.
Exactly.
So then there was the assimilation. Okay, so we've separated you from your land movement. Okay, now we're mixing all the bands together. Well, the bands used to have several areas that they used to work, and then they would gather at certain times because they had different needs. Okay. And it was oftentimes if you were doing things that were unacceptable, like, and you know what I mean, and just really that you were moved outside of the band. And then so everybody was brought back together onto one place and having to deal with all of that. And then there was you were forced to be considered civilized. Alcohol was brought in by the agents, and people that at least cared to some degree would water down the fire water because the alcohol at that time. But the Lakota genetics cannot process that well. And then the sugars and the foods, and then there was a threat to the body, and that was another form of assimilation. And so you have all of these different things. And then you had religion. All of the tribes were forced into religious groups, and each church got a hold of the tribe. And then that changed even the language, because then the language started to come through this filter of the church.
Right.
And it wasn't the traditional meaning behind what was happening. So you have to understand this about the people when you go in, to understand that this is their history and this is what's happened, and that trauma is raw and that trauma is fresh. And if you think you're coming in to save anybody, you better get the hell out of Dodge, because
Exactly. I mean,
that
what?
that's not the purpose. That's not the
No.
purpose. Yeah.
No, and also it's not the purpose of any teacher to do that, because what you're being a teacher is teaching these kids to be able to process these things and to take that into the world so that they can do it on their own. Nobody can control anybody's healing, especially if you are outside the community, you don't even understand it. That doesn't even make sense. So,
and you hit
absolutely.
the nail on the head right there. Teaching is about facilitation.
Right.
Okay. And if you come in with an agenda, that's not education.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's molding a people to your desires or to your will. And that's what happened, when we came in then with the Indian schools and all of that kind of stuff. And at first, okay, please don't get me wrong, because I have to give some credit where credit was due. There was a lot of good intent from people along the Eastern coast that wanted to do something because, they wanted to make things better. But then that's what happens. People wanted to also take advantage. When you open a door, so you open a door for people that don't understand. And so then there was the boarding schools, and people were taken away the first thing that was happened. Their hair was cut. They they couldn't speak their language. They were punished for speaking their language. They were separated and stuck in these chairs all day long. And we know about the horrendous deaths that happened and the trauma. And I won't get into it because it'll make me cry because of the things that I've seen personally.
Right. I mean, you were in the community. You've seen the effects of what that did to an entire community like that.
And then we changed the teaching. So we brought teachers in that should be facilitators, that should be advocates for healing. And those teachers were doing damage. Okay. And they say a nation is never conquered until its women's hearts were on the ground. So if you're taking children away, if you're taking away language, if you're separating people from, so those types of things led to the underlying trauma. But also I've seen the resiliency, and we have to understand that trauma is only one part of it. Our wounds, it's even for us too, because we all have wounds. So our wounds are only one part of us, but they are not us. Who we are is who we came through at the very beginning, that very bright light that was undamaged. And so our job, I feel, kind of as a teacher, is a facilitator to get back to that light and bring that light back out so that it amplifies back out into the world, even past that trauma and past that that experience. So I hope I haven't gone too far askew for where you wanted to go.
No, if you notice, like this is just a regular conversation, like I actually did hit all the points that I wrote down, because so like it just like in a natural way, because you're, first of all, just like you're a really interesting person, I didn't want to interject too much, but
thank you, Nathaniel. Thank you.
No worries. And it's like I almost don't even want it to end. So I'm just, it's like, no, give me more.
So it's okay. It's fine if we take an hour, as long as it's fine for you for time. And then you can use what you want to and what you don't want to.
I'm just gonna post this whole thing, like, and not gonna edit anything. Like, I'll timestamp stuff, but I'm not gonna.
I'm okay with that too. I'm okay with that. My business side kind of was in the back of my head. You need to send out a little release. And I'm like, no, I don't. I don't, because, we're trained, as teachers or as professionals to do things a certain way. And I just, this morning, I felt really open. One of my mentors, David Little Elk, he taught us recently the prayer for peace. So I did that before we started, and I just feel really good right now. I feel, when the energy's right for sharing, that's what it feels like today. So
like with the prayer for peace, is that something that that can be shared with non-native people, or is it a closed thing, or is it like?
Oh, well, he said to teach it. I would say, and that's another thing too. I remember there's something I wanted to talk to you about. So there was a paper that I recently read that was signed by most of the majority of the elders about because the gentleman, and Arvo, do you know who Orville Looking Horse is?
Oh, I've heard the name, but remind me again.
So he's the person that holds the White Buffalo Calf bundle. And he holds the bundle. And there was this thought, do we allow people into a culture or do we not? And he put out the statement, which is really important for an elder to do, because there are no sides in Lakota Perspectives. There's only perspectives. Okay. So it's not us against them or they against us. It's about perspectives, and they work with consensus, and consensus is really important. It takes a heck of a long time. About whether it's okay to open up. And the consensus is if we do not open up, if we do not open up, and this will be lost because people are having interest in it. And it's the same as like, and we understand, what I have been taught from our perspectives is we are our ancestors. We are our
Yeah.
ancestors, and that's a personal belief. We
We
can't
of all
stop
people would
who
understand.
we can't stop who we are, and we can't stop what we're drawn to. So I grew
Yeah.
up in a very Christian household. But I took what was very about love one another. That was what I took
Yeah.
away from that. And I know that then I moved into multicultural peace education. I just am what I am. I don't want to quantify it. I am drawn to things. I find a great deal of peace when I'm in nature. And I feel very drawn to the Native American circular way of practicing because it touches my heart. It just touches my heart, and I can't stop what touches my heart. And I went through a long path of traveling because my faith and my understanding of myself had to come from that pilgrimage or that journey. And I have walked through many different faiths and many different religious backgrounds. So somebody will always find something to be wrong. What matters is that it comes from your heart. When you come from your heart, that light amplifies. And so that intent is absolutely important. So yeah, it is something that I could share with you because he said it is very important to share these things. I'm not going to share the words or his writings or anything up on this screen, but I can try to teach it to you. I will teach it to you in English first because that's the language that we all know. So give me a moment as I pull it up.
So much.
You're so welcome. So I think before we go into this, I just want to just really carefully talk about the virtues, the importance of Lakota virtues before we go into teaching about this prayer for peace. So prayer is really important. That's the first. Respect, compassion, honesty, generosity, humility, and wisdom. And humility is a big one. It's a big one. And so prayer is really important because it's like setting the intent in your heart. And when you've made yourself balanced, then you can go out and stay in your hoop, so to speak, and not be pushed out of your energy center or out of your truth. How many times are we pressed all the times for our truth to try to see, are we going to lean this way or go this way or go this way, even though it doesn't align with us?
Yeah, I mean, every day.
Every day. So having something, whether it be breathing, meditation, yoga, going to church, to mass, whatever it is that calls to you, or going out in the woods and lighting sage, having that sign of center, say, this is where I'm spending time with my inner self. So if I spend time with my inner self, then I can be more effective. So I will do my best to pronounce things as well, but remember, I'm only a beginning Lakota teacher. So a student, I should say. And so I'll read this for you. This is the prayer for peace.
Thank you.
That which is sacred, the four directions, and Grandmother Earth, I am thinking of you, and I send my voice to you. I am thankful for, and I love all of life. But now everything is in great difficulty. So have compassion upon all, so that everything will have peace. And then we always end with all my relations.
Wow.
So
that's beautiful.
The concept behind that is because we look at the world hurting, and we can't just hope for peace for just ourselves, but it has to be a blanket effect. And when we increase peace in ourselves, that has an exponential effect to go outwards and outwards and outwards. And so our peace can be shared with others and become others' peace, because it will instill an opportunity for them to find peace. I had the opportunity to study under the Dalai Lama at the Educator and Spirituality Conference in Boulder, Colorado at Naropa University. At that time, it was the Naropa Institute. And he
Wow.
was asked the question about world peace, and he laughed about it. And he has this really childlike laughter. And he says it's really simple. Happy person, so the first circle. Happy family, the second circle. Happy community, happy world. So it always has to start like that one little droplet in the center, and then those rings go outwards. And so if you ever want to change something in the world, you always have to go first to the interior, because as above, so below, as within, so without. So
Yep.
some of it is our stuff and some of it is other stuff, because we're kind of on this collective journey. So don't take the weight of the world into your heart and say, oh, this is all me. I don't know if you've ever done that, but I have.
Yeah.
I've internalized that because I understand this to a certain degree, that if things are not peaceful outside, what am I not doing on the inside? But we're not responsible for it all. We're only responsible for each choice that we're making along the way. So then the Lakota would be, so forgive me if I make a mistake. Takushkanshkan na panyutopa na unchimaka. Chiksiyo na huye chikia. Yunkan wamaskanskan iyuha tuahila nahina iyuha piwakila. Keya slehan taku iya lila iyo ye kie chahina unchila ha iyuha wawa wala yuhapi kite han mitakue oyasa. So I say han because I'm a female, and for males it would be how. I say kate versus katelo, because katelo is the masculine form and kate would be the feminine form. So it's a gendered language, like a lot of languages are. So
Wow. Well, that's beautiful. Like I'm like this. That made me feel really nice. That's
that's
just
good.
really like I hope that once this is shared, it's like it'll reach other people, and I the whole point probably of the
My mentor
prayer.
is David Little Elk. And if you want to go, I'm having a hard time talking. If you want,
It's
I was getting
okay.
to another space after prayer. But if you want for Lakota language, he is absolutely one of the best mentors that you can have.
Exactly.
And his mom, he's just a Kanju. He taught at the sister college on the other side of the state. And we have a sister college to Ocala Lakota College. And I just really like how blunt he is, and he lays it on the line. And I think at this time in our life, we kind of need a little bluntness, because yeah. So one of the things that he taught me, but I already kind of knew from my own inner growth, is that you can't do something wrong when it comes to your prayer practice or your meditation practice. You can only do what works for you. And
Exactly.
just like in teaching, there's all these methodologies for each individual child when it comes to prayer or spiritual reconnection. We're like snowflakes. And there's a quote from Islam that says, every creature has their form of prayer and God knows what it is. So we
Yeah.
have a way that we connect. And I can't think of any greater prayer than one for peace. When we had something happen in Virginia, and you may have watched my videos to understand that we lost our home. And it happened very quickly. Within less than 72 hours, our house went into trust, and that was it. They didn't want to rent to us anymore. And we'd been there for 4 years. And my husband and I sat together and we thought really heavy about what it was we were going to pray for. And the two things that came out were sovereignty and peace. That's all we wanted for ourselves. You know, whatever made us feel independent enough to feel like we had sovereignty over where our life was going, and peace in that direction. And honestly and truthfully, it may have been the best thing that's happened to me. You know, you don't realize that in the time, but we get caught fighting battles or trying to change things. But if we don't have the full support of our community, we can't go forward. And sometimes for a vision keeper that has a vision in their mind about where things should go, that can be really difficult. Okay, so this is not where we're laying the vision right now. And that vision has to maybe take a back step. And for me, it's been rebuilding the relationship with my husband to work as partners. Because, and it's so funny, we had these two walking sticks that were made for us, right? And we have them in the window right now. We're at my mom's. He brought his together. He goes, together again. But you know, when you think about it, a walking stick is kind of like your staff. It's how you lead. It's how you shepherd yourself or you shepherd your family. And what works for us is working together. We're stronger together. We're stronger when, and so we were forced into this point of having to work together in a way that brought us back to our core beliefs, which is we've always wanted to have a tiny home. We want to have sustainable land. We built tiny homes for other people, but it's time for us. You know, we need to be able to have that. And so, and that goes back to everything that I learned. If we want world peace, we have to be peaceful ourselves. And if people want something, then they will ask for it. But you can't sugarcoat them. You have to reach them and they have to want to do it and they have to do the work with you. And that is a circular perspective, is that the work is being done with you, not you doing the work for somebody else. And
yes,
so those are,
I'm learning that lesson the hard way every day.
Yep.
Like it's been a journey learning that lesson. But it's a good, you know, that's the most important thing to remember. It's like you know, they can't save people. You know, you like if they're gonna heal, they have to make the decision to heal, and that's it. You know, you can't do that. You know, you can lead them to water, you can't make them drink.
Right.
Like you can sit there and cry that like the water's right there, like but like if they're not gonna drink it, like you can't force them to drink it. So yeah, totally.
And who am I to say that they really need to drink the water anyway, too?
Exactly.
You know, because we have to look at it and go, maybe they're there for our teaching.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and that is the other thing too, is like learning through adversity. You know, sometimes if we tend to be a person that gives and gives and gives and gives, the universe is going to send people into our life that take and take and take, until we learn the lesson of when to give, when to sit back and refill, and when to give and when to sit back and refill. And also knowing where our energy is being given to is really important too.
Yeah.
So
exactly. Yeah. Wow. This was an incredible conversation. Before we kind of, you know, and I'd really like you to so like I'm gonna link all your stuff down in the description.
Thank you.
The video and stuff like Neurotic House and all that. But if you want to just like tell the world, you know, where can we find you?
Okay, so you can find me at on YouTube. That's where I tend to be working off of. I've found that this is a great place for my voice and to share what's in my heart, because I can do it without worry. And you can find me at Neurotic House Lynnea Luebben put together. I'm going to move that down so you can actually see it, because I don't think it's in the screen. I'll move that down so you can see it on the screen.
There you go.
And you can also subscribe, like and subscribe. That's great. We do so much with with education and with advocacy, everything from homeschool education to writing books for education. And I really like to do my create a course or create a classroom or help people develop that, because I feel after 25 years of teaching, that mentoring is really what I'm meant to do. And so that's kind of what I like to do. And my channel gives me the opportunity to mentor without worry, because I can just put out what's on my heart and then people can either accept it or not accept it.
Right.
And you can go to lynnealuebben.org. It sometimes is up and down and sometimes not on it, because I will be honest with you, we're in our first years, and our main cost right now is keeping our media, our websites and all those things running. That is our major cost and is the major cost I have. So if you would like to donate, we would appreciate that. You can either donate to us at naradahouse.square site or naradahouse.org. We are greatly appreciated because it helps us to be able to continue our mission, to be able to put out great content for free. And I would like to continue to be able to do that. I also have a book out that you might be interested in. Can I show that?
Of course.
Okay.
Please.
So my book finally came out. This is Under a Strawberry Moon. This is Star Knowledge and Story. This was a video course that we did, but I also have the book. And I will show that to you, maybe. I brought it down, but I have no idea where I put it.
Oh, it's okay.
But my book is finally out and it's on Amazon and Kindle. And so you can read it there. And I plan on doing more of a series for all the different moons. But it has to be inspired like this first one is. I don't want to just put out books to put out books.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
oh, that's so cool. I'm gonna buy a book when I can afford it. I'm gonna buy a book, and I'm gonna do. I would really like you to sign it next time we meet.
I would love to do that. I have some
Oh,
signed copies right now at Bear Butte Gardens here, which is a very appropriate place for them to be because my friend Michelle with Bear Butte Gardens, they have organic farming out there and a collaborative mission with local farmers and ranchers to provide only the best organic pieces and homemade items, which is really important, especially being that close to one of the sacred sites. You can see Bear Butte
yes.
from her home, and she has a farmer's market that's open Monday through Saturday. So you can get a signed copy there too if you're in the area as well.
Yay! I will definitely do that. Well, Lynnea, like, thank you so much. Like this was really healing for me, and I'm sure it's going to be healing for a lot of people. And I'm going to link all your stuff down below, and hopefully, we'll see each other soon.
And it was healing for me. That's how I know it was the right thing. So thank you for letting me share my story and even talking about some things that were a little difficult. So thank you.
Cool.
It was so lovely to see you. So I will say goodbye to you in Lakota. So we don't say goodbye, we say until next time. Until again.
There you go.
So we would say toksha okay.
Oh.
So until next time.
Until
bye
next
for now.
time. Absolutely. Bye for now.